When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits.
Hello, Insatiable listeners. Allie here with a special Insatiable podcast COVID edition. As you know, I wasn't planning on coming back until the beginning of May with our season 11 Sugar Rehab, but obviously the world is a very different place than I thought it would be when I stopped recording season 10. So I wanted to do a community call to help people manage this time in a way that is restorative, replenishing, reduces anxiety, and can set us up for what comes next the best way possible and what's best for us. So I recorded a community call that I did for my list. So I'm giving you access to it so that more people could hopefully benefit from the great conversation we had. And as I've shared on Instagram, if you follow me, my life is a little bit Mercury retrograde vibe meets WTF. So in the middle of this, I did lose my connection, but I came back. So you can fast forward, I think, through that part. And also, I'm probably going to do more of these in the future, quarterly calls with the community. I'm not sure that I'm going to make them podcasts. So if you want to be part of them, definitely get on my list if you're not already at allieshapiro.com. But in the meantime, enjoy this. All right, take care and stay safe out there, however you define safe. And that'll make a lot of sense once you listen to this special Insatiable podcast edition. Decided to make this into a podcast recording for those people who need it. So again, if you're going to ask any questions, it will be recorded. I just want to do the work and make it as accessible as possible for people. I am going to share my screen now. Again, I kicked off the flow of today. And one of the things that I just kind of want to frame our whole conversation is these are my current thoughts on things. And I know we're in really sensitive times. And all of us are experiencing the pandemic. And I see Tanya in Australia. I see a lot of people from overseas. And so we're all experiencing it very differently. And so I am speaking a lot through my experience and the questions that I'm asking these days. I'm actually feeling relatively calm. It doesn't mean that I don't have my moments of tension or that I'm not affected by this. I'll talk about how my parents were on the COVID cruise and have tested positive for it. We lost childcare for a couple of weeks. I run a small business. There's a lot of stresses there. And I want to offer you a framework and some of the things I'm thinking about that are actually helping me stay calm. And so I just wanted to offer that today. And I'm going to try to be as sensitive as possible to everything that everyone is. Yeah, would you mind putting the PowerPoint on slideshow so we can see the slide layer ban out on the side? Let me see if that works. Okay, like that. Let me make sure I can still. Okay, good. Thank you for that, Renee. Every time Zoom updates, I get a little less clear about how to move everything. The only problem is I might have to, at certain times, hit escape so that I can better move it up and down, because right now I think it'll be okay. But we might have to have a little patience with that because I can't now see the chat. For some reason, I can't access the chat. So I'll look at the chat at the end, but hopefully that'll help everybody see this better. So today we are going to talk about feeling out of control is out of choice. And so if we think about, I'm going to take it into everyday terms. When someone tells us that we can't eat something, right? The minute someone tells us we can't eat something, we want it. Or the same time someone thrusts something upon us that we haven't chosen, we feel out of control because we have our freedom of choice taken away. Whether that's a diet that tells us what we can and cannot eat, an exercise routine that tells us what we must do. And now these days, we have a lot of our choices have been taken away. We can't access public spaces anymore. We're advised to stay home. Some of us feel, and I'm going to share some of my experiences, the way that some people are feeling today is the way I felt after the 2016 election. I could not tear myself away from the news. It didn't even feel like a choice to stay informed or whatnot. And so if you think back to your own life in times where you maybe felt the most anxiety or out of control, chances are you had some choices taken away from you, right? And so I really want us to think about underneath this response to COVID, coronavirus, I'll use those interchangeably today, many of our options and choices have been taken away. And the less choices we have, the bigger the energy of anxiety can feel. And the bigger that energy feels, the less we feel that we're in choice, right? As I shared about the election, I felt like I could not turn off the news. The energy just felt so big. And so the less choices that we have. So I'm hearing from a lot of people, with all this extra time, I thought I would cook more. I thought I would exercise more, and I'm not doing that. And it's because we feel out of choice. So we're trying to find choices in other ways. Or some of us have more work piled on us because now we have to homeschool. We have to make changes in our business. We have to do more work to learn how to get things online. A lot of people aren't used to working online. So everyone's having these different experiences of freedoms taken away. And by freedom, I mean choice. And so what I want to hopefully show you today is a big picture process and some questions, and then we'll go big picture and then smaller about how we can be more in choice. And so if you think about some of the choices or the have-tos that have been thrust upon us is, I know in the beginning there was a lot of food scarcity. I really wasn't watching the news a lot, and Carlos had been calling around for different grocery stores to see what they had available, and we were running out of protein. And if anyone knows my work knows I'm a little obsessed with blood sugar, and I was like, I can't not eat protein. And as soon as Whole Foods had more whole chickens, I ran and bought 2 of them. That was like my panic purchase of like protein, because I got really nervous about not having it. And even though I knew that, our co-op was saying, we have the food, we just can't get it here logistically, and it will come. A lot of us, when food scarcity, right? This happens with diets, but it's also happening right now. It feels like I don't have what I need. I don't have choices. We've been told we have to battle COVID. We have to stay healthy. We have to stay informed. We have to social distance. We have to stay home. We have to work from home. Some of us have less work because of market uncertainty and closing of non-essential businesses. And that includes healthcare. I have a lot of healthcare workers who their procedures are considered, every state is different, but not essential. And so they're not working as much. Some of us have more work. Some of us have to have homeschool. And I think all of us have lost our routines. And so in these have-tos, we really feel like we don't have choices, right? And so what I want to talk about today is that the have-tos are what has happened, which is this pandemic global response. But how we choose to respond is where we have agency. And I've heard this a lot before, and I think a lot of us know this probably from some inspirational quote meme. Well, how do you choose to respond? But this can be really challenging if we have trauma stored in our nervous system. Trauma makes us go into black or white, all or nothing, and catastrophic patterns. And this was what happened to me, a way a lot of people are feeling today about COVID. I was feeling about the 2016 election. And I could not turn off the news because I felt like I had to be on high alert. And independent choice, I just also want to say agency, the definition of agency is independent choice. But a lot of time we don't know what choices we have, or we feel like we can't make those choices. So I'm hoping today to help give you some ideas of how we can get back into choice. And so, for example, one of the things that I had done during the 2016 election was divided the country into red and blue states, right? That was how I was black and white thinking. And I was like so angry. As a result, I had divided people into racists and non-racists, misogynists and non-misogynists. And when I really started to unpack the election results, I had realized that, okay, there's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more gray. I actually am racist, even though I don't think I am. And how this applies today is just to show you how there's layers of black and white thinking everywhere. And our system, our whole entire culture, at least here in the States, is very extreme. It's built on all or nothing. It's built on binary thinking, whether it's race, sexuality, gender. And so we tend to go into these, I'm either going to be sick and die or nothing patterns, right? And one of the things that I realized, and I hope that will help all of you guys, is I started to unpack root causes. And if I looked at the 2016 election results, Trump as a symptom, I realized that these patterns had actually been building since by the time I did 3 years worth of unlearning from what I learned in undergrad and in my high school, is that America was set up very differently than I was told. And it was really challenging because I had to challenge everything that I thought about myself, including that, again, I have benefited from racism, that I had misogyny internalized in me because of the systems. And as dark as it felt, it was like, oh, this didn't just happen overnight. And so I am relatively safe. And so if we look at this COVID pandemic, if I really look at root causes of it, I see several right now. I see part of it is the ecological collapse, which is making more viruses and bacteria in the environment. I look at it as decreasing immunity, not only because of how we're eating in our food supply, but because of what is being released into the environment. We put a lot on the individual, at least in America, because we come from a very individualistic narrative. But a lot of our waning immunity is from the toxins in our environment that are a collective issue. And I look at it also as a root cause of we are a country in America, at least that invests more in prisons and war than we do in healthcare. And so a lot of what has been happening and why, if we look at COVID as a symptom versus, and I'll get to why I also think it is a symptom pretty soon coming up, as this immediate threat, this stuff has actually been building and it's going to continue to happen. And we're all relatively safe despite waning immunity, despite ecological collapse, and despite that our systems have been operating this way. We're all relatively safe if we're on this call. Now, the same way that I realized after the 2016 election that there were people who were marginalized and didn't have near the sense of safety that I had become accustomed to, there are people today that are at more risk for COVID. And we need to acknowledge that. And we need to protect those people the same way that my whole life has been turned around and my efforts towards what I want to devote my social justice and my free time to has changed because we are all interconnected. So I share that because it's kind of a dark way of realizing if you're safe now, you're not going to fall ill overnight, hopefully, right? I mean, there's always that chance of the unknown, but to put things into perspective, these root causes have been building. And I want to talk about this today so that we can hopefully change that trajectory because it involves all of us understanding what stories that we're operating under. So knowing our choices can help us reduce this anxiety and enable us post-traumatic growth from this experience. And as I said on the kickoff of this call, you don't have to wrap this into meaning today or even tomorrow, right? That can be its own way of avoiding our feelings of like, well, how am I going to grow from this? I think we need to sit in it for a little bit. I had to sit in the discomfort of the 2016 election. And frankly, it's been worse than I thought it would be for 3 years until I stopped becoming angry. And also most recently, my infertility diagnosis that obviously I worked through, but I had to sit through that discomfort to really get clear on what my next steps were in an effective manner. So I'm not expecting any of us to turn this into growth today. I think that is part of the problem that I'll show in my upcoming slides. But what I want us to talk about today is become aware of the battle narrative that we bring to the body and to health that's limiting our choices. And I want us to start to see new choices by shifting maybe what we're measuring and what our new needs are today. I've talked to a couple people clients who had identified as introverts, and they're really surprised at how not going into work every day and seeing their coworkers, they needed that connection, right? So we're realizing a lot of new needs that maybe had been already taken care of for us that we're identifying, and we have to get those needs met. And then there's also new needs I've also talked to some clients who have children and are saying, oh, this has actually been really relieving. All the chaos of play dates and having to do this and that. We're eating together, we're talking together, we're taking walks together. So we're going through a range of feelings, right? Maybe all in the same day. And so as I shared these narratives that I want us to think about, realize you don't have to jump on this after this call, right? We're going to have time for this. I don't know if we'll go back to a new normal or even some sort of resemblance of what was normal. And I don't think anyone knows. So my point is you're going to have a lot of time to think about this. As well as there'll be more tactical stuff at the end. So if you've listened to Insatiable, or I see a lot of past clients and current clients on the call, you know that we work on going from a socialized mind to a self-authoring mind. So the socialized mind in adult development work I take clients through so that they can, learn what's best for their body and health choices is the socialized mind is where we start. They used to think adults couldn't grow or change, right? This is very fascinating to me. And they thought adults, basically you were an adult and you thought how you thought and you acted how you acted and that was it. But then Dr. Lisa Leahy and Dr. Robert Keegan and a lot of other people came along and said, wait a second, actually adults can develop and change and really change, not just, learn more of their own beliefs. And what they identified was there's this plateau that we all start off as in adults, which is called the socialized mind. And the socialized mind is how we're socialized, right? And we get these norms based on the culture the media, the family, and the groups. And that includes churches, the medical system that we've been socialized into. And that is basically mainstream or conventional, right? Is what we think of as mainstream or conventional. And this moment in time, the same way that maybe we get exhausted from battling food, or we get an infertility diagnosis, or whatever kind of wakes us up, right, in a way that we don't want to deal with our pain anymore, it can be optimal conflict in adult development, meaning it's painful enough that you're not going to forget about it, and the outcomes can be meaningful enough that you'll put the effort into change. Because going through from a socialized mind to a self-authoring mind is not easy. It's challenging. As I said, you have to be willing to challenge your existing stories and truly be open to information that challenges our worldview. We have to unlearn binary thinking, black and white, all or nothing, and learn discernment. And you have to unlearn what we're conditioned to pay attention to and to choose what consciously works for you. And I'll get into what I really mean about that, especially with the media, I think, today. And so again, this is a challenging process, but I'm going to give you some questions so that you can start to think about what it would be to be self-authoring. And again, self-authoring is where you figure out what works for you and you understand that you have power. And by power, I mean choices. And when you understand that, you realize you can co-create a new story. And I do want to emphasize that this new story isn't magical thinking. There's a lot of that in the personal development world. And I don't want to badmouth all of the words like manifestation, or I don't know, there's different words for it. And again, sometimes I don't know how people are defining manifestation or whatever, but this isn't necessarily magical thinking. It's just that things really, you have your own personal experience of something else working for you that maybe you didn't previously think, and that you have the receipts, as they say, that's your truth. So this isn't also about there being one truth. It's about really figuring out and discerning what is true for you. What I have here on the slides is kind of what we're going through with COVID right now. And this is actually my master's thesis from 2013, that the words we use aren't just words, they're stories that we live by. And these stories, again, are often, we don't know we're living by them. And I don't often share this, but one of the other reasons that I went to grad school, in addition to understanding why I couldn't be consistent with the amazing changes that I made in reversing my depression, IBS, and acne, but I was also fascinated that all this information existed, and yet I had no idea. And I am someone who is a voracious reader and learner. And all I was doing was reading information about weight loss and fat loss and exercise and toning. And so the story of me having to battle my weight was really guiding what information I saw. And so when we're in the socialized mind, we seek out the information based on the story that's guiding our lives, whether we're conscious of that or not. And so I'm going to go through today and just kind of talk a little bit about a more neutral reality, and then maybe we can start to think about what's true for us. So COVID-19 is a virus. We know that. That is the neutral reality. And what we keep hearing, at least when I watch the news, and I think in what's driving a lot of panic, is COVID-19 is the enemy, right? And if we look at, and let me take a back up. I have found, and what I hope I guide my clients through, and what has for me, is as we go from socialized to self-authoring, what we're also doing in the health arena is we are getting scientific about the process of science. So there's this big division right now. Some people are anti-science who are denying climate change, right? Or people who are anti-vaxxers are denying science. And I think that there's this idea that science is a monolithic thing, kind of like a religion, right? But the reality is science has many different types of thinking and thoughts and different schools of thought. And yet if we think that there's only one type of science, we're not going to look at information that challenges our worldview. So there's many trains of thought, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So one of the main thoughts that dominates what we think of as Western medicine, and again, that isn't even a monolithic. You can go to anyone who's gone to a couple different doctors and gotten a couple different opinions can tell you that even within Western medicine, right, there is, quote, dissent. But we have germ theory, which is basically this idea that germs are literally, if you look it up in Wikipedia, we'll say it is an invasion of body by germs. And because we have a battle and war narrative, right? We have the war on cancer. We've got to battle our weights, all these things. Germ theory fits into this narrative, right? That we are just a sitting duck and here is this enemy. But there's other really popular, or I wouldn't say they're popular, but they are on the fringes of two different theories. That one is called terrain theory and one is called germ-terrain duality theory. And terrain theory, it says something like it's actually about the terrain, the environment that we have inside of us and outside of us. So if we think of the bees dying right now, right? The bees are dying in faster. Germ theory would say there could be a virus or bacteria infecting them. Genetics would say, oh, the bees have a faulty genes. But terrain theory would say, what's changing in the environment, right? And we know it's Roundup. We know these things. And terrain theory actually thinks viruses are beneficial. and also I want to say is as I bring up some of these facts and these other ideas, think about how you feel in your mind. Like, right? Like I used to, again, after the election, it was like, I'm not racist. I think everyone's equal. I'm a woman. I'm in women's empowerment. I can't have any misogyny in me. But I found the bigger the reaction, the more I had to look at it. So, and maybe you're thinking like, oh, this makes sense, right? But maybe I'm someone who struggles with change more, so I have more of a reaction. I don't know. But terrain theory also says that a lot of times what we think of as germs actually come in when tissue is wounded and try to clean up the tissue and could often offer protection in other ways. And then germ terrain theory is a combination of both. And it's something that to me makes a lot of sense. But what's interesting about germ terrain theory is that you don't expel the germs at the expense of the terrain. And so an example of why I think germ terrain theory, and I just want to cite a couple of studies, and I will send out in the recording to this a chart for all of you that shows the difference between germ terrain duality theory. But Baylor University, a study came out in 2016 that found those of us who have chickenpox, which is a virus, right? Those of us who had chickenpox versus not or had the vaccine, those of us who had it, we had a 21% reduced risk of developing glioma, which is a type of brain cancer, meaning that the children who have had the chickenpox, they may be less likely to develop brain cancer, right? So this is part of terrain theory, that viruses can be really interesting. If you start to think about viruses really being an enemy, or really maybe being something positive, and this is also widely accepted in some scientific circles, this isn't so fringe, but epidemiology studies found that childhood mumps, which my mom had, I mean, I got vaccinated for it, but a younger generation or the older generation had mumps, it actually might protect ovarian cancer. And then in the 1970s, measles infections were observed to cause regression of pre-existing cancer tumors in children. But no one explored this line of scientific inquiry. And I think this is fascinating, so fascinating too. The Mayo Clinic, which is mainstream, is now looking at the measles vaccine strains for cancer treatment. And they're testing it in several tumor types, including glioblastoma, reoccurring ovarian cancer, and multiple myeloma. And then if you get well-rounded, you know that I cited an article that they are finding that ALL, which is the most common type of childhood leukemia, is actually from us being too clean as children now. Whereas we used to be messier. I remember spending in the 80s, like all the time playing tag outside and outdoors. And so when we think of this, right, is the virus the enemy? Is it out to get us? And my mom said I was allowed to share, but her and my dad both tested positive for COVID. And my dad had a little bit of symptoms. He had some sweats and a cough, and my mom was fine. And they've been out of their quarantine days. And so it's interesting seeing that for them now, they're going to be immune to this, right? And COVID is probably going to stay around. It's been around. In fact, the Pentagon had done a paper on some of the military personnel about those people who had gotten the flu shot actually were more susceptible to COVID, but had protective properties of other flu-like symptoms. So I'm just bringing all of this in, not to give you an answer of what you should believe, but to really, how do we reconcile this, right? Is COVID really the enemy? May it be for some people, right? We know people who, when you look at the data outside of New York or Italy that's coming in terms of death, I don't want to downplay the havoc this is wreaking on people. But most of the people have had one, if not up to 3 pre-existing conditions. And so again, when we're in the self-authoring mindset, we can be contextual, we can be discerning. Who really needs protection from this? And how can we devote those resources to those people rather than thinking all of us need to be terrified of this virus? So that is that. just some things to think about in terms of what we have to look at in terms of our level of preparation, on guardness. Do we even have to go to war with this ourselves, right? And again, this is figuring out what's true for you. And I'm someone who, because of the experiences of my life of healing my body from cancer, right? Cancer, taking a germ theory approach to cancer as a teenager saved my life. And yet what rebuilt my health was really terrain theory, right? Healing my gut. What got me working through an infertility diagnosis to get pregnant was terrain theory. So I can see where both of these fit, which is why I like to think that why I tend to filter my news and my information and my actions through germ terrain duality theory, where you have to honor both. And sometimes germs or diseases require a battle approach, but sometimes they don't. So I don't know what's true for you, right? But I just want to give you options. The second thing is we need to eat, right? The traditional war battle narrative that our bodies are put under is we need to gear up, right? Because if we're going to battle, stakes are high, which means eat perfectly to battle our weight, right? And that's what a lot of us feel, and we've internalized it. But as we become more self-authoring, we start to realize with our health, whether it's weight or health, which are sometimes related, sometimes not, that food is part of the equation and more about what I've done over time, but not in a few weeks span. So I see a lot of people panicking about their immunity, and I can understand that we want to build immunity. And in the same way that the conditions that got Trump elected in 2016 had been building since the foundation of America and how our legal system was actually crafted, these root causes have been building, right? Environmental collapse, not investing in our healthcare system or investing in ways that maybe aren't super helpful, and environmental collapse and in waning immunity for all of us have actually already been existing. And so if we've been okay so far and we feel relatively okay, the chances of like a collapse overnight, right, is not going to happen. So if you're feeling pressure that you have to eat perfectly, I want you to think about, is a couple food choices really going to make that big of a difference? If we look over time and zoom out, right, that is how immunity is built, not in a week time span of your whole life being turned upside down. But again, what is true for you, right? Think about that. I'm just trying to give you, and I'll give you some questions. And again, I'll be mailing this video recording out so you can have the questions. But I'm just trying to get people to start thinking in a little bit of a different choices and different options so that you can relax a little bit. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say about COVID is the enemy in this war battle narrative is also consider that we've heard a lot about the gut microbiome, right? And what people may not realize is that the microbiome isn't just bacteria. It's fungi, it's parasites, it's viruses, it's all of that. And we as a country, at least again in America, we thought, oh, antibiotics are God's gift to humankind. And antibiotics are great. They have solved a lot of problems. But then we were like, oh, there's also these good bacteria here, right? I also think about the sun has been made this villain, right? Rather than you have to protect yourself from the sun, rather than, well, what we find is how we eat determines how well we can absorb the sun. And we aren't in the sun a lot. So what we do is tend to be indoors all year, and then we go out in the sun and we get burnt, right? And so what's actually changed is our internal environment and obviously the ozone layer and stuff like that. But we tend to want to pin something on something that may not be good or inherently good or bad, but requires context. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the COVID virus because I think that's probably the most controversial, especially based on what the media is telling us, mainstream media. The third neutral statement is the body requires movement, right? And when we are in this war battle narrative, we think exercise only counts if it's hard or I burn a certain amount of calories. And that is so that we are a good soldier, right? We've got to fall in line with what someone else tells us. And in context of diets or even the medical system that says, eat less, move more, and stress less, but doesn't really give us specifics. To self-authoring, if we expand exercise to movement and how it can serve your well-being goals, a lot more choices open up, right? And I think there's a lot of choices that we need right now that, again, I'll get to some suggestions and questions to help you figure out what you need right now. The fourth neutral statement is we have feelings, right? And we have to have an enemy if we're in war. So we pathologize our feelings. And we dehumanize our feelings with pharmaceuticals, food, alcohol, shopping, and that be positive pressure I was talking about earlier. I don't want anyone to feel like they need to make credible meaning from things right now. But it's like, oh, be positive. And, I've had moments being so grateful for all I have and our health and we're all okay. And then moments of like, oh my God, like I was walking, Carlos and I were walking Coffee and Essa yesterday. I just started crying and I was like, oh, the pressure of all of this. And, in addition to all of this, everyone's life is still going on. And we've had some mishaps over here. Now, aren't mine to share, otherwise I would. I wouldn't say mishaps, but other stresses that are happening. And so I think this be positive pressure often takes us out of the lessons and the insight that we can learn when we're really in our feelings. And so as we step into self-authoring, we start to realize all feelings are allowed, and feelings aren't facts either, right? A lot of the work that I do with clients and on myself, because I'm constantly finding my own blind spots, is that feelings aren't facts, right? Some of us may feel like, oh my God, am I going to lose all my financial safety, right? Am I going to lose my health overnight, right? And these, again, even though they're really big feelings, they are stories contained in those really big feelings that we have to figure out what they are. And feelings can clarify and provide insight. When I had the infertility diagnosis, just sitting in all that was like, do I really want kids because I think I'm supposed to? Do I want a child? There was just a lot that I had to get clear on for myself. The 2016 election, I stayed angry for 2 years until I really learned how to manage that. And I wouldn't want to go back there again, but it really taught me so much about what I value, what I want to stand for, and what actually I want to devote my time to. So I find that feelings, even the uncomfortable, especially the uncomfortable ones, can provide insight and clarity. The fifth neutral thing is the media exists. And I think that we've been told, at least, you grow up learning that the media is this independent source that keeps the government in check. At least that was the vision of the founding fathers. But what I find is that the media reinforces cultural narratives because that is what we want to tune into. That's what feels good because it doesn't challenge us. So a lot of things that's happening right now is this idea that they have to be constantly tracking the enemy, right? And looking at the fatalities and all this stuff. And I'm going to also send you guys out an article about how the media exploits us. It is in the business of clicks and return engagement. So in this article, this woman, Margot, says, if you've suddenly heard about COVID, did you go to the library and read about pandemics and infectious disease? No, none of us have done that, right? But that would have been the logical thing if we were really afraid. But then we wouldn't come back to the media. And so the media has to keep making us terrified so that we feel like they have the answers, they have the truth, they have the facts. And so what we really need to do is, rather than saying this is how I stay informed, is listening to this, is what do I need to know for my and my loved ones' well-being, for my community's well-being? I have not listened to the news. I know that I have to social distance. I know that I don't go out, that we don't go out, and I have to pay attention to when non-essential businesses are open again, right? But I'm doing what I need to do to be a responsible citizen, and we're continuing to do the healthy things we always do in our home. So now if things were to change, right? Like if someone that I love were to get ill, or we would change our direction. But for right now, really discerning through what you need to do to be responsible to yourself and your loved ones. And then the other thing that is, again, a neutral statement, and then it depends on how we run with it, is we have social needs, right? I think a lot of us are realizing that. I know that's something that I learned so much from the 2016 election, and just being a new mom, of like how much you need a community that understands and will allow space for you to process, to feel like you're not alone. And one thing I will say, and I don't know if this will help you, one of the reasons I realized I was so addicted, including to social media after the election, was what I was really looking for underneath that was community and people who wanted to talk about this stuff. The people in my life were just as upset as I was about the election, and they went to marches with me, and they supported me when I did some of the affordable healthcare work, but they weren't as like angry and upset. I mean, my parents could see a bigger arc, and Carlos just has never believed that America was the place I thought it was, right? And so I was really looking for community in that addiction to social media. The problem was I was getting addicted to people who thought like I thought, and I wasn't really learning anything. I was just staying enraged. And there's reason to be enraged. I don't want to dismiss that. But ultimately, and I'll show you the questions with the media, is I had to ask what's actually changing my behavior. And it was going back to books and looking at histories and root causes, and realizing that this is like a long journey and I can't burn myself out. But so we have social needs. So that's kind of about social needs, but we're also realizing that we need community. Again, my clients who identify as introvert, or those who are missing their coworkers, or those who are finding, like, when you work from home and you don't get out of the house, right? Even seeing your neighbors, we can be missing that right now. And in America, we have this very individualistic narrative, right? The hero's battle journey. Sometimes it's clothed in the rags to riches narrative, or, I think of Steve Jobs, the entrepreneurial narrative, right? And we only look at the individual and not all of the systems and the education and the environment and the community that supported them in that process. And so when we get to self-authoring, often we can realize that we are interconnected and we need each other and we need community and we need to move forward together. And that's one thing I'm hoping enough of us get out of this pandemic, is how important we need everyone who's contributing to society and all different jobs and all different healthcare roles. We need to support our doctors and nurses better, all that kind of stuff. I hope we're realizing, wow, we need to treat each other because we're all interconnected, right? So those are some of I just kind of wanted to show you how the battle narrative is forming a lot of maybe how we're feeling about COVID and what we can maybe start to step into. So these are the questions that I think I would love for you guys to start to think about. And again, these questions can change minute by minute. They can change day by day. I know my sleep has been disrupted I'm not directly feeling direct panic from COVID, but I definitely am not sleeping as well. And so it's like the days that I don't sleep well, the way that I move my body is I walk the dog, or put Essa in the stroller. If I get a good night's sleep and I'm feeling like I need to relieve some tension, I do a more difficult workout. I mean, I put that in quotes because you guys know I'm not a super worker outer, but I stay active so that I feel energized and centered. So I think with the COVID is a virus, the questions to start to ask yourself, and again, this may challenge what you believe, and you don't have to immediately feel like these questions are relevant, but just I would encourage you to think about them, is what if I don't need to gear up? What is my true risk? This isn't magical thinking. It is important to know if you're someone who has some lung conditions or you're older with pre-existing conditions. Again, my parents tested positive. They're 75 and they're in relatively okay health. And so they were okay, right? And what is my responsibility, right? And then if we want to learn from this, like, why might I be at risk? And how can I prepare or change? Those kind of things. So that's something really important to ask yourself, right? I don't feel like I'm someone who is at high risk. So it's really important to me to get out in the parks. And even though I'm around people and everyone's social distancing, I feel like the sunlight and the microbiome that I'm breathing in the forest is really important to me. I was on the phone with a friend today who lives in England and has a heart condition, and she's high risk, so she's not leaving her house, right? So we can start to use contextual, when we know ourselves and our bodies, we can really make contextual choices. We need to eat. So how can I eat to feel calm, right? And blood sugar balance is there. How can I eat to sleep better, right? Shifting this focus from if I'm good or bad to how can I eat so that I can manage this better. I was on with a client yesterday and she was saying that, and this is like totally like fast forward the work that we were doing together, because has kids at home that need homeschooled. Her job is busier. Her husband's working from home, right? Like her whole life has been upended. She's working from home and she is just focused on getting through each day. And so she's really eating from a fuel perspective, right? That's one way to look at it for now. It doesn't mean she's not going to go back to eating for enjoyment or whatever later in a healthy manner that she's choosing. But this can really be an opportunity for us to shift our focus away from calorie and weight loss to, okay, how does my food choices affect me on a day-to-day level? And that's one thing that during the 2016 election and afterwards, I don't eat in response to emotions anymore. And so I just felt all this anger and I had to eat to really stay as calm as possible because it was very hard for me. The body requires movements. So rather than thinking that we have a certain kind of exercise counts, what will replenish me today? I think a lot of us are feeling that we're at our limit. We're overwhelmed. So what will replenish me? And do I need my movement to include community, nature, or time to myself? right? If you're now working from home with other people, you may need some time to yourself or not. Or I'm finding I really need time in nature. That helped me after the election, that helped me with my infertility diagnosis. That's helping me now. So think of how movement can serve you to reduce your anxiety rather than have to be something that counts or doesn't count in that battle narrative. We have feelings. So where can you express your feelings safely? What friends will allow you that? What family members who aren't just trying to fix them, but will just let you fall apart and also be grateful, all of the range of it. When I say my life has been a little Mercury retrograde for the past 6 weeks, this is what I mean. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So if you're listening to the podcast, I lost connection, my internet. So apologies about that. So back to here. So we have feelings. So where can you express your feelings safely, and what can bring your anxiety down by 1 or 10%, right? And it may be different every day. The next thing you realize is this media exists, and what news will help keep me prepared, not panicked? I think that's a really important question. And what I really figured out during post-2016 election is what's going to actually change my behavior, because I was confusing outrage with change behavior, and that actually wasn't helping me at all. It was not helping me get clear. It was making me react and not actually respond in a strategic, effective way. And also it made me think I knew what I needed to do when I really needed to be learning from other people. So I really think with our news, we do want to stay informed, yet figure out what's actually going to change your behavior. And I think that's a great discerning question. When we do have social needs, right? And so what social needs have I lost? Right? Think about that. Like I said, if you're used to going into an office every day, or you're used to going to classes every day or work every day, you might have realized that chit chat and banter, research has showed when you see people in your community that or your neighbors, that sense of community and that you're part of a fabric is as important often as our deeper connections. So what sort of social contact am I learning I need? And how I need to rework what social connection looks like. I'm working on season 11 of the podcast, and I had a fantastic podcast interview with one of our guests, and we're going to do an intellectual stimulation friend date on Sunday, which was totally unexpected. So there's a lot of opportunities here as well, because, Carlos and I used to have intellectual discussions, but now it's mostly about, did Essa poop? What time did he nap last? And again, it's all fun, but it's not the same. And it's not, you can't expect one partner to be everything for someone. Okay. And next with home, and these are some questions, and I don't know what changes you're going through. So again, don't feel like you have to answer all these questions, but whatever area is hitting you, I wanted you to have some ideas about what questions to ask. What do I need so home feels like home, right? And if you're working from home, you may need a dedicated space to work so that it doesn't feel like work is taking over your life. What new routines do I need to separate life and work, right? I mean, I'm cracking up about these memes of people who are discover you can wear sweatpants from the bottom down, and on Zoom you can still look professional, right? And people are being hilarious about changing into clothes that's like work, and they feel like they're having some sort of time in their day rather than it all running together. I like to take a walk, and it's okay, that's the end of the day, shutting the phone down, right? Different rituals to kind of cleanse the palate, if we're going to use a food metaphor, but to help us reestablish the separate components of our life, including if we aren't working now. It's okay, are these days all going to bleed into each other, right? What do I want to start filling my time with? Home, what sort of education do I want my children to receive now? Again, if we go into the socialized mind, when we look at how education, at least in America, was set up, it was based on an industrial factory model. It was designed to make good workers who obeyed authority. And if we look at indigenous cultures, they kept children at home and taught them life skills and all this stuff. So if your children are coming home, and again, I'm not saying I have the answer, but some things to think of. What do they need to learn right now? What emotional support do they need? Are there other lessons than maybe, and again, I don't know what's required from the schools, but thinking that maybe you have to keep up that same pace when you're working full time, to me, just seems impractical. So how can you self-author what the educational experience is going to look like within the confines of what's expected? And is there more room for choice than maybe I'm not sure. That's not a stage I'm at in terms of parenting, but just trying to give you some questions to see if there is room. Financials, that's a huge stress for people. So I think it's where can I cut back? And getting clear on this, because if you get clear, you may realize that you have more financial bandwidth to weather things for a couple of months, maybe not. But I think this is a place people can really catastrophize, especially here in the States. There is no social safety net. So it's easy to catastrophize. And this is somewhere where I go worst case scenario, because Carlos is a contractor. I have a small business. But when I go to the worst case scenario, which would be living in my parents' basement, I'm like, I'd still be safe, right? So sometimes going to worst case scenario can be helpful. But where can I watch and wait before catastrophizing? And we were headed for a recession, global recession in general. So and I think it's going to be worse now. So how can you plan for that, right? Like, let's not be caught off guard even further. And it may not be as bad. I don't know. I'm not an economist. And I don't even know if economists know. So time will tell. I don't think anyone just really knows. But if that's really stressing you out, like, get clear, right? Clarity really helps. And then this new normal that we're in, right? What am I grieving? A lot of people are grieving, understandably, trips that they can't go on, right? Jobs, opportunities. There's a lot to grieve. You can also, what are you enjoying, right? There's nothing is all good or all bad. And I think a really important question that I hope we all think about is, what do I want to bring forward? A couple of clients this week were really into the simplicity that all of this has taught them, that they really enjoy. Everyone can be different, but I think it's important as we move forward. I don't personally want to go back to the same normal, because I feel like the systems and structures that exist are very limiting, and these structures are also kind of crumbling inside of us, and we have to change as well. So what do we want to bring forward? And again, I don't think things are going to go so drastically different than they are now, similar to other periods in history after pandemics and whatnot. But just some questions to think about and give yourself the space, right? Part of what's troubling with trauma, and a lot of our old trauma patterns are coming up. And that was the case with the 2016 election. It wasn't all about the 2016 election. It took me back to the place of when I had cancer, feeling completely out of control. And trauma is too much, too fast. And so we need to, if we can give ourselves space, we can start to regulate our nervous systems more. So I wanted to give you some concrete stuff. So we went big and to ask some questions for yourself, and then I'm going to stay for questions and answers. But I think because our systems are so stressed right now and overloaded, some food recommendations for those. I think extra protein and fat right now is really important to keep our anxiety down. If you have trouble sleeping, 1 tablespoon of nut butter before you go to bed, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, oftentimes it's blood sugar crashing in the middle of the night, which can be from adrenaline and cortisol, and just we feel like our mind's racing, but that's part of the symptoms of deregulated blood sugar. And if you're allergic to nuts, there's seed butter, like sunflower seed butter. Actually, that's what I've been doing the past couple of nights, because I woke up one night, I was up from like 2 to 5, and then Essa was up. It was just like, I was a zombie. So I'm just doing that kind of as an insurance policy so that I can get good sleep, because that's my priority right now. Exercise. Again, ask those questions to yourself. But if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, you want to do parasympathetic dominant exercises. So how we felt so amazing after Katie's breathing exercise, what she did was get us into parasympathetic mode, right? Where we're breathing from our diaphragm and our stomach, deep within our stomach, not chest breathing. So that kind of movement, walking, yoga, bar, weight-bearing exercise like Pilates, functional medicine, or functional movements can be really, really helpful now in grounding us. But also some people I know, Juliet and I did an Instagram live last night. She's like, people I know are running just 8 or 10 miles now. I was like, okay, we have different friends, because no one I know is running 8 or 10 miles right now. But if it is a ritual workout for you, rituals are really important. So if you have a ritual workout that's working for you that isn't parasympathetic based, that's okay. I'm just trying to give ideas of ways to tell the body it's safe right now, because our emotions are handling a lot. Emotional needs. It's okay to fall apart. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be delighted, right? Maybe all in the same afternoon. And I think it's really important to experiment with what you need right now, right? Do you need to fall apart? What does that look like? Are you feeling so grateful, right? And you're enjoying the simplicity, but realize there's no right or wrong way to do this. No one knows how to be in a pandemic. The last one, well, I guess people who were in the last one, but they're like 102 or 110, right? So our generation and our collective culture right now, there's no right or wrong way to be when there's so much massive uncertainty. The news, I think it's important to remember the proportion of the response that we're doing as a globe, it doesn't equal the degree of threat. We're doing this to prevent it. I heard an epidemiologist speak, and she said, if we do this right, it will look like we overreacted. right? And so I think that's really important to realize that the drastic amount of change doesn't equal the threat. Coffee, that's coffee. He's been a little possessed lately. With the news, is this part of only feeling safe if I'm on high alert, right? Is the news making me, that's what I realized had happened to me. It made me feel like being on high alert was going to protect me. I'm someone who feels like the more information I have, the more safe I'm going to be, which is not true, but it's a delusion that I definitely participate in a lot. And it works sometimes. And I think working on tapering, it's hard to just kind of cut yourself off altogether sometimes, but really checking in of like, is this draining me? And I find for me, I look at people who are being looking at the data versus the reaction and versus are invested in my reaction, right? Like Twitter to me kind of promotes panic. So I'm not really on Twitter anymore because I don't need panic anymore. There's also a Chrome extension that you can delete the newsfeed in your Facebook. I forget exactly what it's called, but if you Google it, I did that after about a year after the election, realizing that I could still go on and socialize without seeing these like inflammatory articles on both sides. And then the connection needs. We need connection to nature, to transparency, check-ins with who you're quarantined with, right? For a lot of people who are living with other people at home, this is new for everyone, and you might not know what you need and what the other person needs. Virtual social dates, I think, are really fun. And I think if you're new to working virtually, just a recommendation of being more in contact with you think than at work, because it's really easy. The less interaction we have, the less data we have. And clients, you know this, our stories build up. The less data we have, we kind of confirm our existing reality. So if you're new to working from home and feeling anxious because you're not getting the same nonverbal feedback or whatever, I really suggest being in more contact than you think you need to keep yourself feeling connected and also clear on what you need to do. So those are some signals of safety to the body that can, again, the more safe the body feels, the less anxious it feels. So now we're going to go to Q&A, and I'm going to stop the share. And, we have some in the chat. Facebook. Oh, great. Thank you, Tanya. Facebook Purity is the Facebook extension that I was talking about. So that's a great concrete tip. It helps. So I would love to answer any questions that anybody has or discussions. I'm always love to talk about these ideas, reactions to germ theory, terrain theory. Holly, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yes, and I held my hand up too.
I didn't see it.
Oh, there we go. I always like to raise my hand.
Oh, you did the analog raising of your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to say to everybody, I'm turning 65 this year. And these graphs that they are showing, the big circle that show the death, who is dying, starts at 60 to 79, has a big portion of the pie, and then 79 on up has the other big portion. So it's like, I don't want to see another one of those pies ever. It doesn't do anything for me. But the question that I had was, I'd never heard about the germ terrain theory. Am I pronouncing it right? So yeah. I want to know, what books would you suggest on reading about that? Because it speaks to me.
Yeah, it's kind of common sense. It kind of is intuitive, right? So what I'm going to do is after this call, I'm going to send this journal paper that has a nice breakdown of the differences between it. And I would honestly start with Googling some of the scientists who have been pursuing this, right? Or you could even you could just go, I'm sure there's books on it. It's just something that I've kind of internalized over the years but I'm going to send you kind of the highlighted differences of germ theory, terrain theory, and then germ terrain theory, because ideally science builds on it itself, right? So I'll send you that, but I would just start, I'm sure there's books on it. Oh, wait, is someone saying a book that they have? I'm hoping you'll send the 2 last page handouts for reference. Sorry, love the talk. Oh, okay, Tiffany. Yeah, I'll send this I'll figure out a way to send it. But yeah, I would Google. There's not a book about, probably about it, but you could probably start to find some articles on it.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if there's some specific scientist that you really liked that.
Oh, got it. I will say one of my good friends, part of her work, she does a podcast for a microbiome company, and she just interviewed a woman, I think she's from the National Institute of Health, but about how viruses are helpful. And I can include that link that might be a great place to start. I trust her and who she curates her information for. So I can send that podcast link out. Yeah, let me make a note of that. Great. Thanks, Holly. If you're a veteran to Zoom, you can raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, you can hit *6. It looks like we only have one person left on the phone. So does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, germ terrain theory is, to me, it's where everything's going, as we realize, like, oh, wait, there's some useful things. Turns out.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Becca.
I've been listening to your podcast for a while, so thanks for all of that work. I was curious, while we're here, I've been thinking a lot about my blood sugar and the fact that I'm home, I'm eating things that are here in my house anyways. And so I was wondering if there was some resources specific, like your resources, whether it be one of the self-directed programs or something like that. I mean, I know you're in the middle of Truce with Food now, and that's obvious, and nothing is starting soon. So what would you suggest if someone wanted to work on balancing their blood sugar while they're home?
Yeah. Well, actually, I am going to be it's not going to be until June because I can't get my act together yet. Not that I just have a lot going on, but I'm going to be doing a sugar rehab live program that starts in June. And it's basically the self-study version of Freedom from Cravings. I'm just going to rename it, and we're going to take a little bit more focus on sugar. But if you go onto my website, on the methodology page, there's like, where do you want to start? And the number 3 button, it gives you access to a breakfast experiment. And it's basically the first lesson of Freedom from Cravings. So you can start there to see where you fall on basically the vegetarian to paleo continuum. So that'll give you like a big start for that. So I hope that's helpful to do that breakfast experiment, because everything's experimental because you have to basically get your own body's feedback, right?
That sounds great. Yeah, I did the breakfast experiment maybe a month or 2 ago.
Uh-huh.
And so that was helpful. And I think I'm looking for a little bit more. So either Freedom for Cravings or waiting for the June program, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, everyone because I'm kind of making it live for the first time. People who have bought the Freedom from Cravings this year, the difference in price is going to be like $20 for the live program. So if you do that now, you can join the live program for like $20 more if you don't want to wait, basically is what I'm going to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say, if you don't want to fully invest in that, you can just kind of take that template of what did work for you in the breakfast experiment.
I feel like I was closer to the paleo end.
Yeah. So then what I would do is try like a paleo lunch, and then try a lunch that's kind of paleo but adds in carbohydrates, and you'll start to be able to tweak. That's basically what we do in the program. There's like a whole flow chart. That would be my next step that I would tell you to try.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Blood sugar is so key. Sarah, I think you have to unmute yourself, Sarah. Renee said no more cruises. Yeah. The Princess has been great. They refunded my parents all their money and gave them 2 new cruises, but my dad's like, I'm never going on a cruise again. So yeah, that's his COVID plan. All right, Sarah, there, you're unmuted. Wonderful.
There we go. I'm about the same with technology as you are.
We made it. We're here.
Yes. And I finally got my camera on. Hey, I was really happy to hear you mention in the beginning about the inertia portion of all of this, because I'm one of those that has been furloughed and I get to work one day tomorrow. Yay. But I had all these grand plans that, well, I would do this and I would do that. We've finished redoing our kitchen, and so I'll finish getting all that put together. And have I done any of it? Hell no. And it's just mind-boggling that I can't muster the energy to get up and get out of my chair, so to speak. So thank you for that. That makes me feel at least a little better about not doing anything. I have been cooking, and cooking healthfully, yay. So Carolyn and I are managing to pretty well stay on our keto program, and that's okay. I will try the suggestion of nut butter before I go to sleep. I've been eating cheese, but I will try peanut butter instead. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah, it's a huge help, I have found. And I think you bring up a great point about the inertia, because we are often taught to think about like what's happening to us, but we have to think about the internal experience it's bringing up in us, right? Mm-hmm. And we are going through this collectively together, but then we also have our own individual histories of like, uncertainty is often traumatic, right? Unless you won the lottery, but then you probably were playing because you assumed one day you were going to win, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. You might still be like, but they've done interesting studies on that too, how people kind of lose friends and family. So it's not the panacea, but yeah, no, I think, and again, if we think of what's interesting is if you are somewhat, and again, you aren't eating your feelings, right? So it's like, oh, now I got to employ the tools of what do I do with these big feelings if I'm not eating them?
Yes.
And so it's a huge, I've said to a lot of clients who are like, I'm not doing anything. I'm like you're being forced to deal with it because you're not eating, right? And so it's a new layer. So if that makes you feel better too, it's like, oh, these are here because I'm eating well.
Yep. And I'd just like to say how good it is to see you. You look wonderful.
Oh,
and
thank you.
And I saw Isa early in the broadcast, and how wonderful it is to see him too.
Thank you. Yeah, that's part of the, like, we kind of joke with it. Like, whenever I see him, I'm like, Corona, what? Because he has no idea what's going on. But he's just like, ah! And I'm like, that is such a helpful, reminder for me of like, he's kind of this like blank slate right now. He has no idea. So
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. It's part of why I'm so passionate about people becoming self-authoring is I wouldn't have him right now if I had, listened to Western medicine. So, and not the Western, and again, we want it duality. It's not either or, it's holding all of it. But I've just had so many good results challenging what people had told me was my destiny for my health. And I want that for everyone. Yeah. Thanks. Well, congratulations, Sarah, on the keto. And it's okay to have inertia. It's kind of like, I think sometimes it's a healthy response, right? Rather than just reacting, it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Oh, we have an interesting discussion about, Katie, new recipes every single time. Do they have to be new? I wonder. Oh, and Nicole has some ideas about fresh herbs. Yeah,
not necessarily new, but it's like everybody's getting tired. I guess we didn't realize how limited our rotation of meals was. and now it's like, wow, we really need to expand our horizons. And really, I think the biggest challenge though is like, I'm used to being able to eat my breakfast and lunch because I work outside of the home. And so I have my needs met. And then at dinner, I can sometimes make a little something different for me. Whereas now trying to balance my needs plus not have my 2 teenage boys and husband totally revolt. I'm trying to just find that balance.
Yeah. No,
I like the idea though of having them cook a meal, which my husband's really good. He'll grill and stuff. So he does really well with that. But yeah, maybe having my 2 teenagers cook a meal and seeing what they come up with.
Yeah, I hear that. We go to Costco and Carlos was there one day. He's like, what do you want me to get? He's like, I'm picking up salmon patties. And I'm like, I can't do salmon patties anymore. And he's like, oh, you just need more variety than me. I'm like, Carlos, we've been eating those for 12 years. Like, there's not, I mean, like, literally we get those. It's like, I don't need so much variety. I just cannot eat them anymore. So,
yeah.
And I don't know if you saw, but Tanya said, try Yumly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love these ideas. Oh, and okay, so PJ Whitcomb asked, how can we help other loved ones who may be going through additional stresses on top of COVID, cancer, without this information coming across as me telling them how they should be processing or behaving at this time? I simply just want to share this information and hope that it may be helpful. Can I unmute you, PJ? Or can you unmute yourself? I don't want to put you on the spot so we can discuss a little bit more. I think it's a great question.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, great. So tell your question and let's figure it out.
Yeah, I just have a family member who is received sort of a cancer diagnosis out of the blue, as many of them are. And, my sister's don't know if this is the correct language, but like pretty self-evolved. But, there's some information and, ways to process this that I'd like to share with her and maybe our other siblings, because we're all going through this with her. We're very tight, as our family is no stranger to cancer specifically. But the thing is, I don't want to come across as, I don't know people's readiness to hear, and I'm really not one to speak up. I'm the youngest in the family, so I just know my place. But I do feel like this information could be helpful to all of us going through the COVID, but then also having the extra issue of a very scary stage 3 cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. So do you mean the information in terms of like what specific?
Like how like the theory, like some of the things that we're talking about today. I think that, helping to get through our days and helping to process this can be very helpful, but I don't I don't want to come across as, here's how you guys should be thinking.
Yeah. No, and it doesn't work, right? It's like, do we want to influence or be right?
Yeah, exactly.
Questions. I think the best way is just asking people like, how are you feeling about things, right? Like we often assume. It's been interesting. Like I even felt a little nervous bringing up germ terrain theory, right? Because it feels some people are so panicked and scared, and it feels like I don't want to dismiss what they're feeling. And you guys have all been so receptive, right? And I'm like, oh, now granted, it's certain people who are attracted to my work are curious people willing to question. So I think just opening up with like, how are you guys feeling about all of this? How are you feeling about the risks? And then sharing, I always just share what's been true for me. You could say I was on this webinar and they were talking, have you ever heard? I always find that asking people questions doesn't put them on the defensive right away. And we can't change people, which is, so if anyone knows how to patent on that, right? But yeah, I think just opening up and just sharing your own experience and saying that's always what's worked for me in terms of, because I don't know what's right for other people. And I don't want to, I barely want to be responsible for my own choices, let alone other people's. So I think just coming with curiosity, right? It's like the obstacle is the path often, like, but yeah, that's how I would just start of like, and I often too think about if people have a certain cynicism about something mainstream, it's like the same way that you think X, Y, and Z, I'm starting to question, or so meet them where they are in terms of, because everyone questions some things, right? I mean, hopefully. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, and having compassion for where people are, because like sometimes I get on my high horse of like, oh, this, and I'm like, there are so many places that I am probably self-author, that I am socialized, that I just don't know. So it's a very humbling process it's just hard to be human, at times. So yeah, just taking a genuine, like, I don't know approach, but here's what I'm thinking for me. I find coming from that position has really helped a lot with my own family, because they don't see me as, my dad like sends me articles of like, sometimes that Dr. Oz is saying things. I'm like, Dad, I've been telling you that for 15 years. He's like, yeah, well, Dr. Oz, I'm like, okay. Yeah. All right. Or else, I mean, my dad sends me all these articles on sugar, but he loves sugar, and I'm like, Dad, there's a difference between learning and changing. And he's like, you might be right about that, but he's 75. I'm not gonna change him. So it's also appreciating people, I think, in the now for who they are.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know that's a big concern of a lot of my clients right now, is the other people in their families who may not be as healthy. Yeah. Good luck. I hope you got my email. I'm now like connecting 2 and 2.
Yeah, I did. And I
Good. Wonderful. Okay, Katie. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, I find myself not feeling as motivated to do things, feeling more tired, just feeling, it's kind of a roller coaster. And I saw something about this kind of being a trauma response, and really comparing it made me think of one of the things you talk about is going into avoidance mode. So I just wanted your thoughts on that in terms of, which I love some of the questions around getting movement and things like that. But I'm talking about, some people are like, I'm going to organize my entire closet. I'm going to do all this. And I feel like I just don't even feel that productive. I mean, I need to do my work. I need to do the stuff as a wife and a mom, taking care of the house, whatever. But beyond that, I'm like just making it day to day. And so I just wanted your thoughts on this whole idea of our response kind of being a trauma response, and either fight or flight or freeze, and that freeze component, that avoidance. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what a lot of us are experiencing is grief, right? Sort of what Sarah described, like the inertia. I mean, it may not be, I think we often think of grief as just losing a loved one, right? But there's grief of loss of, like Sarah she's lost work hours, right? There's certain things. So I think some of it is grief. And I think we have to ask, almost the metaphor to me for discerning is like, am I cocooning or am I avoiding? Right? So yeah, I was on Dr. Kelly Brogan. She had a webinar yesterday about her version of what's happening out there. And she talked about this parable, and I've heard it before and I love it. And I forget where it's from, but basically this guy is walking by and he sees this caterpillar, right? And the caterpillar is in this cocoon, right? And he's like, oh, he's struggling, and basically pierces the cocoon. And then the caterpillar never gets to be the butterfly, right? And so I think we need to look at that in microcosm way. Like, am I struggling right now because I'm trying to process? and I'm trying to like ground myself again and come back to myself, and this is leading to something better, and not better, but like something clear, or am I just avoiding because I'm building this up too much, right? Okay. So I almost like that cocoon, like, am I cocooning and like just regenerating? I mean, one thing I hope that comes out of this and is teaching me a lot is about slowing down, right? It's not comfortable because often we're so busy because we're trying to stay away from all our feelings, but can I just slow down? And is it okay just to not do anything, right? Like, and just be with our families, right? Or be with ourselves. So I think that's kind of how I think about it. If I'm avoiding or am I cocooning?
I love that. And because I think I have a lot of guilt that comes with productivity. You know, if I'm not being productive, that whole conditioning of productivity equals, I don't know, worth or value or whatever. And so when I see certain things and I'm like, oh my gosh, that person's got all this done and I haven't even done anything or whatever, you know. And so I think that's what I'm battling, is that guilt of not doing that. But I love the new reframe that you're talking about with cocoon, because that makes me feel like I'm still doing work. It's just more internally, and it's other things than maybe cleaning out my closet or whatever.
Yeah. I saw this great meme, Adrienne Marie Brown, she's someone who I follow. She has a book called Emergent Strategy, but she posted something that said, Corona is the virus, capitalism is the pandemic. And I just love that, because I think all of us have been trained that like to work hard, and you do have to work hard, but we've been told that we are only as valuable as what we can produce, right? And so again, I think even like closing all the businesses down. I mean, I don't know if I agree with how long the response. That's a whole other line of inquiry that's happening for me, but I haven't figured it out yet to even have people ask the right questions. But I think it's forcing all of us to look at like, why are we going? Why, is it, because I think we often think it's like, well, one day I'm going to take a rest so that I can then enjoy it all. And it's like, but it's right now, and we can enjoy right now. And just for, I love trying on all different frames of reference, but in astrology right now, I think it's in the South Node is in Cancer, which is the home and mothering. And I think all of us are being forced to be at home, and like metaphorically, our bodies are our home, our homes are our homes. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's where our attachment, if we look at attachment, like that's kind of our home base. That's maybe a better way of saying it. And it's like, what do we want home base to be like? Because then we come from there, right? So I just think it's very interesting. Yeah. Oh, and yeah. And Tanya said, I think it's worth looking at the different trauma types and how our behavior is being reflected in those. Yeah. There's flight, fright, freeze, or fawn. Yeah. I actually think fawn is a more pop culture term, is people pleasing, but I think it's people pleasing to capitalism to like overwork and keep going versus do I want to reframe? So, but I think it's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love our community. So many great questions. Lisa, I love that you said that. How could you also bring questions up when certain conversations come up? That way you aren't forcing any new way onto them, just posing a question. Yeah. Yeah, self-authoring is not for the faint of heart, as all clients know. All right. Well, then I will send this out, and I will send out, thank you for this. Very grounding. Okay, good. I will send out the chart about the difference between terrain, germ, and terrain theory. And if you're interested in it, I'll also get the podcast that Holly had asked about, she had asked about resources, but I always find it interesting to hear other scientists talk about, the evolutionary need and benefit of viruses, right? Now, again, it's all contextual, but I'll send that out. And then I think someone had asked about just the last 2 slides with the questions, and I'll make sure to send that, as well as the video and the audio. So if you guys want to keep this, listen to it, you can, or for people who aren't listening, oh, good, I'm glad it's valuable. And I'm going to it'll be a podcast next week. So if you want to hear it, hopefully help other people, because I think we're going to be in this for a couple of months. I was chatting with some other, two of my good coaching friends this morning. One's in Canada, one's in the UK. We were saying like, what's your deadline before you like revolt, of quarantine? And I was like, well, the things I'm really missing are like brunch and working out. So I can't go to the restaurant and be like, give me brunch, So I don't know how to revolt against this. So I think what I'm going to do is make brunch this weekend and find a good gluten-free pancake. They have this really good gluten-free pancake that's like almond flour and rice flour. And I'm like, I'll just make us omelets and one of those so that I'm not missing it so much. but I think this could be extended for a while. And I just hope all of us really take the opportunity to I wanted to actually mention this in the beginning, but I'll just wrap up with this. Often when we fall off track with our eating, we think once I get back, once the busy season ends, once the holidays end, once my birthdays end, then I'm going to focus on this. And in story work and the work of adult development, we look at those off track times as like, what's really going on there. And so I hope all of us won't look at like, well, once things get back to normal, like let's really, again, it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow, but like, what can this off track time really teach me about what I need, who I want to be, what's important to me, and whatnot. So, oh, sorry, you missed brunch too, right? It's like the best meal. I agree. I'm totally biased. I think it's the best. I especially like, because I'm lazy, so you get to eat breakfast and lunch without having to cook, right? You go out and then you don't have to cook the next meal, since I don't love cooking. But all right, I'm going to cut myself off, because I could chit chat forever. But thank you all. Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Tanya. Yeah, you have a good night. You're already on Friday in Australia. So, oh no, it's morning for you. That's right. I always get it mixed up. And Eva as well, who's on the call. So thank you, everyone. I'll send all of this out probably tomorrow, because childcare ends in 20 minutes. So I gotta get going myself. But I will unmute everyone and we can just say goodbye. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Yeah,
I love you.
Okay, Lynn. Hey, so funny. I didn't know you were on.
But I was definitely anxious about it.
Oh my God, this is great. Carrie Ann. Oh, this is so fun. I see so many names on the side now. Oh, and Serena. Wonderful. All right. Oh, Caitlin, great. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at AllieShapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.